He hadn't seen her in 10 years, but still woke at night with the sound of her breathing in his chest. The wind carried her scent. The earth still held her shape. And when the hyenas came and he screamed into the dark, it wasn't a man who answered. It was a shadow limping out of memory teeth, bared eyes burning with something older than time. Each morning he rose before the sun, not out of duty, but from a pull he couldn't name, something deeper than habit, older than time. The silence before dawn wrapped around him like a presence, not a void. And in that stillness he found something close to peace, though never quite whole. He moved through the rhythms of his day, gathering firewood, tending goats, greeting elders with a practiced nod. But his gaze always drifted to the edge of the savannah, to the place where the grass grew taller and the shadows moved like memory. He never spoke of her. Not to his mother. Not to the boys who mocked the way he wandered too far alone. Not even to himself. But some part of him was always listening, always waiting. Sometimes he left scraps near the flat stone, by the tree's raw meat wrapped in cloth like an offering to something sacred. No one else noticed, or if they did, they said nothing. They had seen her once long ago, limping low to the earth with one paw, mangled eyes, fierce and sad, the village had feared. Her called her a curse, but the boy knew different. They had shared something wordless beneath the stars, something that lived in silence and breath and stillness. Now he walked those paths alone, but never without the feeling that she might be near, not watching exactly, but present in a way the world no longer allowed. His nights were filled with the crackle of fire, but he always sat just beyond the warmth, as if holding space for something wild and half-forgotten. Sometimes a breeze would shift the grass in a certain way, and his chest would tighten for no reason, other than the sudden ache of remembering the weight of her head on the earth, the sound of her breath, the way she had looked at him. Not like a boy, not like prey, but like something broken that matched her own shape. The world around him moved on, seasons, turned rains, came and went, but inside him something stayed unmoving, untouched, waiting not for her, maybe not even for answers, but for that silent moment when the wind whispered, like her breath, and the night almost felt whole again. It happened without warning. No storm, no struggle, just a morning like any other. When she did not come out of the trees, the stone by the clearing untouched the air, too still. He waited first with confusion, then with worry, calling softly at first, then louder, his voice breaking against the vast silence. The savannah offered no clues, no tracks, only the absence of presence and the feeling that something permanent had shifted. He searched for days, moving farther, each time farther than he was allowed, than he dared. But the world gave him nothing, no trace of fur or blood, no cry in the distance, just wind and heat and a sky too wide to hold grief. He returned each evening, slower, quieter, less a boy, more a shell of one. And though his body returned to the rhythm of village life, something in him did not. He stopped speaking and less spoken to. He laughed only out of politeness, and even then it came from nowhere near his chest. His mother asked once where his smile had gone. He said it must have run away like everything else. She was not mentioned again, not by name, not by memory, but his eyes still searched the horizon. And when goats strayed toward the woods, he lingered too long, watching the brush as if it might move in the way it once had. At night he stopped placing meat by the stone, but he could not bring himself to stop looking at it. He began to dream of her, not as she was, but in fragments, golden fur flashing between trees' eyes. In the dark breath against his cheek, he would wake reaching for something that was never there, and each time it took longer to let go. Seasons passed, boys around him grew louder, braver, reckless with the certainty of life. He remained quiet, moving like someone half underwater, his limbs heavier, his voice lower, his heart a space too wide to fill. Villagers called it a phase, said he would forget and grow. But grief is not something that leaves, it only softens and waits. Her absence lived in him, not as a wound, but as a shadow. Something he walked beside something, that shaped the way he moved through the world. He never cried, not once, but sometimes when the wind shifted, he would stop mid-step, as if listening for a sound that had long since vanished, as if hoping that silence itself might speak her name. Let me pause here for a moment and ask you, where are you listening from? Has there ever been someone in your life, maybe a person or even an animal, who remembered you after years apart? A connection that time couldn't erase. If stories like this speak to something in you, follow along. There's more to come, and some moments may just stay with you long after the story ends. It began with something small, the way it always does. A shift in the wind carrying a scent that didn't belong. Or maybe it was the shape of a cloud that matched a memory too closely. Or the sudden sound of a distant growl caught on the air like a whisper from another life. He turned quickly, heart beating too hard, and for a moment he was a boy again, barefoot watching the grass part beneath golden fur. But when he blinked, it was gone. Only sky. Only silence still. The ache it left behind stayed for. Days it pulled at him, even as he tried to ignore it. He found himself walking farther than usual, with the goats circling places he hadn't visited in years. Trailing paths once burned into his body like instinct. One afternoon, he found the flat stone, again half covered in grass and dust, and when he touched it, it felt warm, as if something had just been there. The pull inside him deepened, but so did the doubt. What if she was gone for good? What if she had forgotten? What if the bond he carried was only his to bear? The questions pressed against his ribs, but no answers came. Just the slow, steady turning of the world and the growing sense that something was near, not seen, not heard, just near. Then came the fall. He was chasing, a young goat, distracted, moving too fast through tall grass. When the ground disappeared beneath him, he didn't even have time to scream before he hit the bottom. Pain exploded through his leg, white and hot and merciless. He lay in the dark, shaking, trying not to sob as the sky narrowed into a circle far above. He called for help once, twice, again and again, until his voice turned raw, but there was no answer. Only the sound of wind above, and then silence broken by the rising laugh of hyenas. Their footsteps light their eyes. Already gleaming, they circled the mouth of the well shadows with teeth closer. With each breath he tried to move, but pain pinned him in place, helpless, hopeless. And then it came. Not a voice, not a hand, but a roar. Raw and ancient and furious. It split the dark like lightning. A blur leapt into view. Not a man, not a myth, but something he had buried in memory. Golden and scarred, limping, but alive. Her eyes met his, and the world shattered and remade itself in a single breath. She had not forgotten. She had come. The world held its breath the moment the last hyena slipped back into the grass. Defeated, the silence that followed was not peace, but something heavier, soaked in blood and memory. She stood above the well, her chest heaving, her side torn open, her golden fur matted with dust and old scars, one paw still dragging like it always had, and yet she was more than real. She was impossible. The boy couldn't speak at first, only stare. His breath caught not from pain, but from the sheer weight of seeing her again. Her face older, thinner, her eyes the same, and she did not come close, not right away. She only looked down into the well ears, flicking body tense, as if unsure whether she was dreaming too. The wind shifted, and he caught it, her scent, and something in his chest cracked wide open, something that had been locked for years without him knowing. His lips moved soundless at first. Then he whispered her name soft, like a secret, like a prayer. And she froze, the muscles along her neck pulled tight, her head tilted, just slightly, and then slowly, as if moving through water, she lowered herself until her eyes were level with his. And in that gaze was everything. He thought he'd lost. There was pain, yes, and time and distance. But beneath it, something untouched. Untouched by years, untouched by silence, untouched by doubt. It was recognition, and it didn't come like thunder. It came like breath, like the warmth of sun. After a cold night, he reached up one shaking hand, and though the gap between them was too wide to close her, head dipped just slightly forward, not touching, but near close enough for the air between them to hum. And for that moment, the pain in his leg, the blood on her side, the years of aching silence all fell away. It didn't matter how long it had been, or what. They had become only that they were here now, not as they were, but still enough, still true, still hers, still his. She did not stay forever, just long enough to be sure he was safe, just long enough to remember and be remembered then, with one last long blink, slow as dusk. She turned her head to the wind ear's alert body trembling, and the boy knew before she moved that she would vanish again, but not like before. This time, the silence she left behind was not empty. It was full of everything they had said, without words, and would carry forward without needing to be spoken again. The villagers found him at sunrise half conscious. Bruised, broken, but alive, they carried him home, speaking of luck of gods, of things they could not explain, and though he said little, they saw it in his eyes, something had returned that was not there. Before in the days that followed, as his leg healed slowly beneath bandages and bitter herbs, he would lie beneath the open sky and listen, not for voices, not for sounds, but for that feeling that something was near. Not beside him, not visible, but near. His mother noticed first the way he smiled without reason. Again, the way his fingers moved absent-mindedly over the carved wood figure he hadn't touched in years, the one shaped like a lion. The village boys who once teased him now sat quietly beside him, waiting for him to speak of what happened, but he never told them. Not because he didn't want to, but because the words would never hold it right. And maybe they didn't need to. The change in him was enough. Some nights he limped outside leaning on a stick, moving slowly toward the clearing near the flat stone. He never brought meat this time, only sat legs folded, eyes toward the dark. Sometimes he would whisper her name. Sometimes he would simply listen. And though she never appeared again, not fully, he began to notice small things. A print near the water one morning, the scent of her musk carried by the wind, a tuft of fur caught on a branch, and once, just before dawn, a low, breathless growl from somewhere deep in the grass. Not threat, not hunger, but something else, something like memory answering memory in those moments. His chest would fill with something he hadn't felt since before she vanished. Not joy, exactly, not peace, but weightless knowing that she had not forgotten that neither had he, and, slowly, carefully, gently, the boy began to laugh again, to speak, to sit closer to the fire and feel its warmth as more than just heat. Life did not return as it was, but it grew in quiet places through gestures, through glances, through a kind of trust that needed no proof, and somewhere out there beyond the village, beyond the hills, a lioness with no paw moved through tall grass, slow, steady, watching, not waiting to return, but knowing she could. And that was enough, because some bonds do not vanish, they do not fade, they do not break. They become part of you, part of the land, part of the silence between heartbeats. They wait, and they remember. Some bonds are not bound by time or distance or even silence. They live beneath the surface, like roots in dry earth, waiting for rain. And when they return, they do not come with noise or promises, but with a look, a breath, a presence that says, I remember. You, not as you were, but as you are now, changed, scarred, still mine. Theirs was never a story of taming or owning. It was a quiet recognition, a shared ache that never needed words. And when the world forgot, they did not, and that was enough, because real connection doesn't vanish. It only slips into the wild until the moment it is needed. And then it comes back, not to start over, but to make whole what was broken.